Good afternoon, everyone, or evening. Evening. Thanks to everyone for being here tonight. You could be doing anything, and you decided to spend your afternoon, evening with us. So my name is Celeste Flores. I am the Director of Community Building at Mano Family Resource Center. And I want to thank you once again for joining us virtually. And language access is critical. So tonight we will be having Spanish interpretation, and I will be giving some instructions in Spanish and then come back to English and let you guys know what I just said. Buenas tardes a todos, buenas noches, mi nombre es Celeste Flores y vamos a tener interpretación esta noche para este foro. So si miran el menú donde tienen su foto, donde dice participants, share screen, raise hand, record, también hay un globito que dice interpretation. So van a hacer ahí un clic y van a ver que pueden escuchar en otro idioma. So está el idioma de inglés, español, y también lo que pueden hacer es que pueden elegir mute original audio, y eso quiere decir que no van a escuchar lo que se está diciendo en inglés, solamente van a escuchar en español, y queremos agradecer esta noche a Topacio por la interpretación que nos está dando. So, hey y'all, I was just saying that there's along the bottom of your screen, there is this little globe that says interpretation, and you can choose to listen in another language. We have English, Spanish, and you can mute the original audio if you're listening in Spanish and want to just thank Topacio, who is providing the interpretation tonight for us. You know, like I said, language access is critical. In Lake County, the Hispanic Latino population makes up 25%. And Mano's mission is to empower the immigrant families to fully participate in their community. And 95% of the community members that we serve are Spanish speakers. Lake County is a community made up of many groups where English is not their native or preferred language. Because of the members we serve, we advocate and help assure language access in Spanish. But this committee recognizes that there are other languages in this community that would maybe also want to hear in their native or preferred language. And if you have the capacity, we invite you to join us to plan future forums. And if you don't, still reach out, and perhaps there's a way to work on a solution together. And now I will pass it on to a fellow co-host, the NAACP of Lake County.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Sandra W. LeConte. I don't know if I can be seen to you yet. Jean, can you see me?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. That means everyone can see me. All right. So I'd like to welcome especially our audience participants, but even more so our esteemed candidates who are here to speak to us about their run for the Second Appellate Court, Susan Clancy Boles and Chris Kennedy. We're so glad that you decided to spend this day with us or this evening. I represent the NAACP Lake County branch, but there are more than 13 or 14 active branches in the state of Illinois and more than 2,200 units who are pretty much all 99% voters in the United States of America. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us. We look forward to your telling us what you will be sharing regarding the writ of habeas corpus and everything else that's judicial. Thank you for being here. I welcome you.
Welcome to today's candidate forum. My name is Jeannie Kirby, and I'm on the executive committee for the League of Women Voters for Lake County. It is my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the League of Women Voters in this area. Those are chapters in Deerfield, Lincolnshire, Highland Park, Highwood, Lake County, Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area, McHenry County, and the Northwest Lake County. The League is a nonpartisan organization that does not support, oppose, or endorse any candidate or political party. Our mission is empowering voters and defending democracy. For decades, the League has been organizing candidate forums at all levels of government and as a service to the public to help them learn about candidates before voting. We are pleased so many have registered for this evening's event. Tonight's forum is for the State Appellate Judge Candidates 2nd District. Appellate court judges serve as legal reviewers of appealed trial court decisions and procedures to ensure that they are adequate and sound. The video of this forum will be available for future viewing. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this evening. Barb Lymans is a former co-president of the League of Women Voters of Wheaton and a former civics teacher and civics mentor liaison for the teachers throughout Illinois for the McCormick Foundation. Currently, she serves as the Voter Services co-chair for the Wheaton League, and she resides in West Chicago and therefore is unable to vote for any of these candidates in tonight's forum. Without further ado, let's welcome Barb Lymans.
Thanks, Jeannie. Good evening, everyone. It's an honor for me to be moderating tonight's candidate forum for Judge of the Appellate Court, 2nd District. As Jeannie said, throughout its history, the League of Women Voters has been providing opportunities for candidates seeking public office to speak directly to voters through nonpartisan forums. We had hoped that tonight we would also be able to hold a forum for the candidates for Illinois Supreme Court, but regrettably, one of the candidates had difficulty making a commitment to participate. Before we begin the forum, I would like to begin by reviewing some of the league ground rules for candidate forums. The candidates attending tonight have signed and returned the ground rules by the deadline established in the invitation. These rules specify the format, time limits, and other rules related to the conduct of the forum. I will be responsible for enforcing those rules. The candidates will begin in alphabetical order with their opening statements. They will alternate in the order in which they answer the questions. And after the question portion of the forum, each candidate will be giving a closing statement. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for their opening statement, 1.5 minutes to respond to each question, and 1.5 minutes to make a closing statement. Their responses will be timed, as you will see on the screen. The timer will give a 1 minute and then a 30-second warning. The questions have been submitted by the public in advance of tonight's forum and have been screened for appropriateness for the office and to avoid duplication. Regrettably, there will not be enough time tonight to ask all the questions that have been submitted. The format for tonight is a candidate forum, not a debate format. Candidates are expected to accurately represent the facts. The League of Women Voters is not responsible for the accuracy of statements made by the candidates. It is the responsibility of the public, news media, opposing candidates, etc., to fact-check statements made by the candidates if deemed necessary. This forum is held as a service to the voters so they can hear directly from the candidates regarding their qualifications for appellate court. Candidates' responses reflect their own views and opinions, and they will refrain from commenting on the views of other candidates. The event tonight is being recorded. The League claims copyright ownership of any recording or transcript produced of the forum. The forum will be posted in its entirety on the host League's websites, social media platforms, and the Illinois Voter Guide. Any use of the forum recording requires the express written approval of the League. Audio and video must be broadcast unedited and in its entirety, except by the media reporting on events. Finally, I want to emphasize how grateful we are for the candidates who are not only willing to serve in office, but who agreed to participate this evening. So let's welcome the candidates for Judge of Appellate Court, 2nd District. Candidate Susan Boles and candidate Chris Kennedy. Welcome, both of you. Thank you for joining us. And let's begin by having opening statements. Candidate Boles, you have 2 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. I want to thank all of our hosts this evening. Thrilled to be here. I know there's another debate going on right now that's being televised, but what makes us different from that is, as judges, this really should be a nonpartisan race. It really should be about experience and who is the most well-trained for the position. I like to say that my candidacy comes, you get 3 for 1 with me. First of all, you get experience. I'm the only circuit court judge in this race. I'm in my 16th year on the bench. I have sat in virtually every division and sat and presided over every type of law. And why that is important is the appellate court is the reviewing court of virtually every decision that a trial judge makes, both substantively and procedurally. So to be a trial judge in wearing a number of different hats throughout my 16 years, whether it's juvenile, whether it's specialty court, whether it's the state mental health hospital, whether it's felony, whether it's civil, you need that experience, you need that training in order to be equipped to be at the appellate court level. My 17 plus years as an attorney prior to coming on the bench was wonderful training to be an associate judge, but not to be an appellate court judge. You also get leadership with me. Number two, I'm the past chief judge of the 16th Judicial Circuit, elected by my fellow circuits for the maximum term of 4 years. I was one of only 15 judges chosen by the Illinois Supreme Court to serve on a committee to map out the strategic plan for the entire judicial branch for the state of Illinois. And I also have service. I give back both professionally and community-wise, and hopefully I'll be able to talk about that more later. So thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Kennedy, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
All right, thank you very much. I'm Judge Chris Kennedy. I'm from Lake County. I'm in the criminal division. I'm not a member of the more famous family. My grandparents were immigrants. My father drove a garbage truck for a living. And I was able to attend law school because I got a scholarship to come out to Chicago. I'm a native of the Bronx, but I have been in Illinois for 31 years now. In law school, I did very well, and I was on the Law Review, published an article. I was on the executive board, won the writing award. And then I was able to get a position as an assistant state's attorney and a criminal prosecutor with the Lake County State's Attorney's Office. I became a felony prosecutor, tried many violent crimes, and had a lot of trial experience in the criminal side, and then took that to the civil side for a small firm in Chicago, where I tried multi-million-dollar cases. I won a $9 million jury trial and a $30 million jury trial. I was not paid anywhere near that, but I eventually formed my own firm and continued that work. I did a significant amount of appellate work as well. And I have some cases of mine that are published in federal and state by federal and state appellate courts. But it was while I was running my own firm that I ran into issues. My daughter could not get coverage for her many disabilities. And I got involved in a project that led me to lead. And I created a movement that lasted for over 6 years, and I passed over a dozen laws. I've run an insurance company in receivership as well, responsible for over $1 billion. And I've been 12 years on the school board before I became a judge. I was not lucky enough to be appointed young. I did not have that path. But I have been in the criminal division. I hear traffic, DUI, misdemeanor, domestic violence, and rotate in bond court. I have the highest ratings of the bar associations, and I'm proud to talk about more of my record and diverse background later.
Thank you. Candidate Kennedy, the first question is for you. What are the pros and cons of going to the bench as compared to practicing law?
So I practiced law for 25 years in courtrooms all over the state, in trial courts, appellate courts, federal and state, and in various jurisdictions. One of the things that most people don't know is that judges really don't know much about other judges' style, what their capabilities are, because you don't really have time. I mean, you're busy doing your own cases, plus you wouldn't have time to delve into the particulars of each case anyway. But as a lawyer, you get to see the judges, and you know your cases inside and out, and you know exactly whether or not the judge understood what you were doing and what the case was about and what the law was. And so I learned from my practice, and I've applied this as a judge, that one has to approach the job of judging the law and facts of a case with humility, because you, as a judge, are the recipient of information. As a lawyer, you know your case inside and out. You present it in the order in which you try to make it known to the judge. And so as a judge, you have to understand that. You have to understand that you don't know what you don't know. And you also have to understand the complexity of the law means that you couldn't possibly know everything. And so the worst kind of judge I ever appeared in front of were the types that thought they knew everything and plugged it into what they'd already experienced, rather than the ones that I try to emulate, which are the ones that are humble about it and will listen to each side.
Thank you so much. Candidate Boles, the same question. What are the pros and cons of going to the bench as compared to practicing law?
I absolutely loved the practice of law. I truly did. And I think what makes it different as a judge for me is being able to be the mediator or the middle of the road, and being able to give both sides their day in court, listening to both sides and being able to decide fairly. I've been fortunate in my career to wear a number of different hats and be in a number of different courtrooms with a number of different litigants, whether it be CASAs from abuse and neglect, whether it be GALs from a divorce proceeding, whether it be DCFS from different courtrooms I've been in, felony. And so what it does, it brings so many different participants and viewpoints, and being able to listen and then apply the law, which for me has just been, in every courtroom that I've sat in, just been a blessing. I mean, I was a civil litigator for over 17 years prior to coming on the bench. And my first 8 or 9 years on the bench was all spent in criminal. And it was a great learning experience. Every day was different. People's liberty interests are at stake. So it's extremely important to be able to listen fully and understand the law substantively. So it's been a joy ever since I've been on the bench.
Thank you. We'll start with you for the next question, Candidate Boles. What is your vision for the future of our judicial system? What changes would you advocate for and why?
So I think this last year and a half for our judicial system was profound. We were forced into a world of technology that generally the judicial branch is very slow to adhere to, and we were forced to do that, and it's been a blessing. So how I would look at the judicial system in the future is increased access to the system for everyone through technology, through innovation, different things like education services, through transparency, being able to collect data and see what is working, what isn't working. Again, I was fortunate enough to be appointed by the Supreme Court to be on the Strategic Planning Committee to map out for the entire judicial branch for the state of Illinois for the next 5 to 7 years. How are we going to grow? And innovation and technology is huge in that, in order to provide access to all different communities, all different languages, all different ethnicities, socioeconomic types. So to be able to be innovative and continue to maximize our technological advances, I think is extremely important.
Thank you. Candidate Kennedy, what is your vision for the future of our judicial system? And what changes would you advocate for and why?
So as a judge, I've been on the front lines literally of the Zoom revolution. And I and a couple of my colleagues have been the test cases in Lake County for the high volume calls in the criminal courts to deal with people through technology. And you see the vast differences that people have in terms of bandwidth, in terms of their surroundings. Many people can't even find a quiet place to go on Zoom. And so it is a method of encouraging greater access to justice, people who couldn't otherwise come, people with disabilities especially. And I know the lawyers certainly appreciate it for efficiency purpose. They don't have to drive between courthouses to be able to make routine appearances. And so that has been a major innovation. On the appellate court, what we're going to be seeing more of are records on appeal that include not just the digital evidence that's presented as an exhibit, But eventually we're going to be able to see the actual video and audio of courtroom cases. And someday that is going to be part of the record on appeal, where it hasn't for a very long time. And that will bring some changes as well. And so there won't be perhaps as much deference to the judgment in the moment by the trial court, or maybe there will. But these are changes that are coming. And I think we need to be open to expanding all of these things.
Thank you. The next question is a two-part question. So if you became aware of unethical conduct on the part of a trial advocate in a case in which you were presiding, how would you handle it? And the second part is, do you believe judges should be required to report attorney misconduct? Candidate Kennedy, we'll begin with you.
Well, I do believe it is the duty of a judge to report attorney misconduct. Attorneys have a duty as well, given certain circumstances regarding the Himmel decision and other technical aspects, that if it does fit within that, every attorney has that duty, and that includes judges. And so I do not tolerate any misbehavior by any participant in my courtroom. And that goes even to, basic decorum, much less anything unethical that is done in my courtroom. I have zero tolerance for any of that. And frankly, I haven't run into much of it, but you do see little white lies every once in a while, little excuses that may or may not be true. And I will do whatever I can to suss them out and determine whether or not they're actionable. And if somebody persists in misconduct, then absolutely I'm going to report that. And we have the power of contempt. Somebody lies to me in court, that is direct criminal contempt, and that is sanctionable immediately and by up to 6 months in jail. And so I have unfortunately had to hold people in contempt in my courtroom. So that is something that the judicial branch stands for. There is absolutely no excuse for dishonesty or misrepresentation in a court of law. That is the basic tenet of the courts and the judicial branch, is honesty and being truthful throughout the proceedings.
Thank you. Candidate Boles, would you like me to repeat the question? Or I think you placed yourself on mute.
Yes, please, if you would repeat it. Thanks, Barbara.
If you became aware of unethical conduct on the part of a trial advocate in a case in which you were presiding, how would you handle it? And the second part is, do you believe judges should be required to report attorney misconduct?
So the simple answer, as Mr. Kennedy said, is yes, attorney misconduct, 100%. We have a duty to report that, and there's no issues about that. The integrity and the faith in the judiciary, in the legal system as a whole, depends on that. Unethical conduct on behalf of a trial advocate, I also think is something that needs to be dealt with. In today's time, there are different types of conduct that you see in a trial. I just finished a trial within this last year, and I had an elderly advocate. And was it unethical? Not necessarily, but there clearly were some challenges that advocate or that attorney was having. And there was a responsibility that I had to follow up with regard to that. So there's not just always somebody trying to be unethical or dishonest, but there are other challenges, whether it be substance abuse or things along those lines. I was responsible for passing the amendment to Supreme Court Rule 21 recently, which now has applied the Lawyers Assistance Program and given chief judges the ability to refer both judges as well as attorneys as a diversion program, with whether it be mental health issues or substance abuse issues, challenging issues in the courtroom, which need to be dealt with, again, to assure the faith and the integrity in the system as a whole.
Thank you. Next question. What are your views on whether the court as a whole deals effectively with racial and gender bias? What are your views on whether the court as a whole deals effectively with racial and gender bias? Candidate Boles, we'll begin with you.
As a whole, I think this is an area that is going to be forever necessary to address, educate, and further our commitment to. This whole area is a part of our mandatory judicial education every 2 years, which is paramount. And I think we need to continue and also strengthen it and broaden it. And when I was talking about the future for the courts and having transparency, being able to do data collection and things with regard to bias, and being able to then circle back and educate further with regard to that, I think, again, is paramount. We all live, the state of Illinois is very diverse. And in order to be representative of our entire communities, we need to expand and evolve with that. So we need transparency, and we need to address fully the biases, both conscious and unconscious.
Thank you. Candidate Kennedy, what are your views on whether the court as a whole deals effectively with racial and gender bias?
I think there's a lot of room for improvement, that we as judges are individually responsible for improving in every way, from simple civility to participants, regardless of their gender, their ethnicity, their race, their socioeconomic background. They need to be treated exactly the same as everybody else who participates, who may have different backgrounds or different resources. And where the criminal and even civil systems tend to fall down is particularly on race and economics. The party with more money tends to prevail more often. And that tends to correlate with other things, including gender and race. And so these are historical issues that have been there in American society for a very long time. And we need to be conscious of it and aware of it. And plus, in addition, part of civility includes being respectful of people. I'm very careful not to misgender anybody or assume someone doesn't speak English or anything else that might, be considered treating somebody unfairly or without the proper respect. And so it is the absolute duty of the courts to ensure that biases are removed and that we're conscious of those that are inherent in society.
Thank you. Candidate Kennedy, this next question will begin with you. What criteria would you use for deciding whether to impose or affirm sentences outside of standard ranges?
Well, that seems to be more geared toward the federal system, where the sentencing guidelines tend to dictate things, and there are statutory bases for deviations up or down from the guidelines. Now, there are sentencing ranges with every type of a case. And so, misdemeanors up to a year, different felonies could be 1 to 3, 3 to 5, et cetera, all the way up to life without parole. And so in terms of sentencing, you have to take into account each and every one of the statutory bases, and there are many, many of them. You also have to consider the facts of the case, the impact upon the victims, and the impact on society, and the considerations of the defendant and how he or she was brought before the court, the circumstances of what they did, their intent. There are just too many factors, really, to dictate by law in terms of statute everything that needs to be considered. And so that's where it's absolutely critical that judges are given the discretion to consider the individual facts of every single case. And where that discretion is encroached upon, we as judges, and really the judicial branch generally, needs to remain independent. And any encroachment on that really does tend to take away from the quality of justice. And that is the key toward it is the key to the credibility of the judicial branch, that we are able to individually make good decisions.
Thank you. Candidate Boles, what criteria would you use for deciding whether to impose or affirm sentences outside of the standard ranges?
And again, there's so many statutory factors that go into any kind of sentencing. The number of years that I sat in felony, you can't say that any one case is alike, even if you're dealing with a possession or a distribution of a drug case. I specifically recall one distribution case that I had that involved two young individuals, young 20-year-olds. One was simply a passenger in a car where there was distribution or delivery being made. This was an individual who really was in school, had a job, was doing things that contributing back to the community, and to give him the chance at a diversion to say, okay, if you're able to complete this term of your sentence and continue on with your education, be a contributing member back to society, there is a good reason to not follow a statutory yes, this is what has to happen, especially because he had no direct contact. Now, again, you don't always have that ability with every single case. But I think the goal here is ultimately to be fair, and you want contributing members of society and be able to, as Mr. Kennedy said, to have discretion to be able to take a look at each scenario and see which factors apply and who is a danger to the community and the safety of the public.
Thank you. Our next question is, in the area of hate crimes, what are some of the issues in balancing free speech rights against the need to control offensive activity? And we'll begin with you, Boles.
You know, again, I'm not sure judicial wise where that ultimately comes into play. I will tell you that, especially as chief judge, we had oftentimes people at our 6 courthouses around the county would want to protest different issues at different times, which they have every right to do. And peaceful protesting and making issues aware to the public in a peaceful way, everyone has a right to do. My responsibility at that time was to make sure that people were safe when they were coming into the courthouse, not only the attorneys, but more importantly, the citizens and the litigants who needed to get to the courthouse. So it's managing everyone's rights together to create a safe environment for people to be able to express themselves in a civil manner. Which I think 100% I was in support of at that time and continue to be so to this day.
Thank you. Candidate Kennedy, your thoughts.
Hate crimes are particularly odious because they are singling out a person or group because of their protected status, as because of their gender, their background, their ethnicity, their religion, and all of these are things that the Constitution protects people from, is being singled out but for that purpose. And that's the basis of hate crime law. And I don't equate hate crime with fair speech or free speech. It's not remotely the same thing. There can be aggressions made in people's speech, and many people are provocative, but it is a very different degree to engage in hate crime. Now, the gray area, I think, probably comes in with people that speak for the purpose of inciting action. And so we've seen quite a bit of that. And I believe, you know, the rule of law, if you believe in the rule of law, which we all as judges do, we are not going to put up with anyone who's going to incite violence or resorting to violence or vigilantism. None of that is appropriate or acceptable under law. And so I would take issue with anyone who would equate provocative speech with insightful speech. Civility certainly warrants not being a jerk, but there are limits to what the law can impose in terms of people behaving civilly.
Thank you. Our next question is, What do you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice, if any? One more time. What do you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice, if any? And candidate Kennedy, we're going to start with you.
So obstacles that I've seen as a judge and really throughout my life are primarily access to information, access to resources, and access really to the kinds of things that get one ahead in life outside of those, financial or informational things, the types of connections that people have. And I think in the law, there is a lot of that. There's a lot of connections that get one ahead in one's career. There is a lot of back scratching that goes on inside groups versus outside groups. The main obstacle that I think is encountered on a daily basis is whether or not someone has the resources to pursue their case. And this happens even between corporations. At some point, one side just runs out of money or runs out of the ability to pursue justice. And it's kind of an old bad joke, but the lawyer asked the question of his client, how much justice can you afford? And that's all too true. There is far too much of that. And so there are some provisions in the law that seek to make that a little bit more equitable. The provision of public defenders for the indigent who are facing jailable offenses. But for civil cases, very much you tend to be on your own.
Thank you. Candidate Boles, your response to the question?
I think the greatest obstacle to justice really is access, and access really comes in many different forms. It can come because of language, that the courts are not equipped with proper interpreters. It can come because of socioeconomic status. So you don't have a computer, you don't have the ability to have internet. It can come with a disability, whether that be a mental disability or physical disability. And not all courthouses throughout the state are equipped in being able to adjust to that. So that's where, when looking at the future of the courts, in order to create equal access for everyone, we have to eliminate those economic barriers, those interpreter barriers, the physical and mental capabilities. So it's increasing the understanding of the system and our transparency and our educational services. You know, I joke to people that we need to create like the old ice cream bus, and go out in communities, whether it be one day a month, and here comes the 16th Judicial Circuit bus to different communities to give access, to help just increase understanding of the system throughout different areas of the counties of the state. So people still feel that this is where they want to go to solve their civil disputes and have faith and integrity and also trust the system overall.
Thank you. The next question is this. Please describe your firsthand experiences, if any, dealing with people who are different from you socially, economically, or politically. And Candidate Boles, we're going to start with you.
I've had many experiences, and they've been some of my most important, I think, in my life. I will tell you, of my 16 years on the bench, one of the courtrooms I've enjoyed the most has been the assignment to this Elgin State Mental Hospital, which was dealing with involuntary medication hearings, involuntary commitment hearings, electroconvulsive therapy petitions. It was seeing and being exposed to people that are in a challenging point of their life, but that's all that it was, and they needed a chance. They needed somebody to advocate on their behalf. They needed people that cared for them and that were looking out for their best interests. And the mental health team that's put together, again, wearing a different hat depending on what courtroom you're in, was so important, from having Northwestern professors in that situation to everyday, people that were check out people that didn't speak the language, that were having issues, and people, they were being ascribed different diagnoses. So it was such a broadening experience for me, and just really eye-opening, and feeling like a very worthwhile and important role at that point.
Thank you. Candidate Kennedy.
I've lived my entire life among people different from me. I started life in a very diverse community in the Bronx. Even after we moved out to the suburbs, I held many menial jobs. We're a working class family. My first job, actually, for a paycheck instead of just mowing lawns, was when I was 13. I worked with migrant workers in a farm that planted onions. And to this day, I despise onions, but I did learn some Spanish. And I actually went to a state university with a very diverse population as well. And I believe that is the lifeblood of America. And it really is what makes the United States strong, is having diverse people, diverse backgrounds, committed not to a creed or a religion, a background, an ethnicity. We are a nation of ideas, and the idea being that we are all equal under the law. And so one aspect that I had not had a lot of exposure to in life until I had a daughter with disabilities was that community. And my daughter has very severe autism, very severe epilepsy. And I became an advocate, not just for her, but for thousands like her. And I spent a lot of time in my career doing that work. And I was very successful at passing laws and gaining awareness and helping other families. So.
Thank you. Our next question is maybe not quite as long-winded, but a little simpler one, perhaps, that something will come to mind. What we want to know is, could you please describe one of your most difficult cases? And we'll begin with candidate Kennedy.
Well, so recency comes to mind. So, you know, the cases that I tend to ponder even after I've made a decision tend to be the ones involving young people. And I get cases that sometimes are somewhat less. They're not felonies, but they're misdemeanors, or they're even ordinance violations. And when people are young, it can affect them. And the judicial system needs to treat them fairly, or and in such a way that they learn from what happened. The system does give them an opportunity to make amends for their cases. So let's see, as a judge, I don't know that I can talk about a specific case. Some of my toughest cases have involved people who are severely hurt, who did not have resources, and unfortunately may not have had anybody who could provide resources. And so there are tragedies every day that the justice system is unable to address, or at least provide the measure of justice that's required. And so when I had cases that where someone was severely injured, for example, and could not recover, or the person who had done it could not provide any type of compensation for them, those are the ones that stick with me even now.
Candidate Boles, can you describe one of your most difficult cases?
I can. I think, you know, again, over my 16 years, I've had a lot of difficult cases at times, or cases that I remember. Even in this past year, I had a 2-week medical malpractice case, which was very sad because a boy died at only 8 months old, and extremely emotional, extremely sad. I've had at least 3 really difficult murder cases. I've more murder cases than that, but 3 that I can remember that really stick with me. But I'll tell you, my years in abuse and neglect were really formative for me, because again, you're in a courtroom where I think people generally think, oh, I'm so sorry for you that you're assigned to that courtroom. But quite frankly, it is a courtroom of hope. It is a courtroom where you have a family that is not functioning for one reason or another. And if a child's being hurt or the safety is being threatened, the family is given the opportunity and the services to correct that behavior and hopefully come together. But if they can't do that, then that child is given the opportunity to have a lifelong, loving, safe family with someone else who is going to love that child. So many cases in abuse and neglect where you're just honored to be involved in the whole system and helping families in some capacity, one way or the other.
Thank you. The next question is a two-part question. The first part is, do you believe that everyone has adequate access to legal help and to the legal system? And the follow-up to that is, if not, what can be done to provide wider and better access? So the question again is, do you believe that everyone has adequate access to legal help and to the legal system? If not, what can be done to provide wider and better access? Candidate Boles, we'll begin with you.
You know what, this goes back for me kind of to the future of the courts. No, I don't believe everybody has adequate and equal access to the courts. I truly don't, for the number of reasons that I've stated, whether it be language, whether it be socioeconomic, whether it be physical or mental health issues. I truly do not believe that there is equal access. So I do think we need to be innovative. I think we need to provide education services. I think we need to have transparency. We need to increase the understanding of the system for everyone to help maintain the integrity and the faith in the system. So in order to do that, like I said, to be innovative, whether it is the ice cream bus, you know, the justice bus that travels the county and provides town hall meetings for members of the community, whether they want to figure out how to do a name change or a small claims complaint, or public defender buses. So we need to increase and thinking out of the box in order to create access. Opening additional buildings isn't going to do it, because then you need security and everything else. We need to bring our knowledge, understanding, and education to the community.
Thank you. Candidate Kennedy, your thoughts?
So the short answer is no, that there's not sufficient access to representation, to the legal system generally, and how to improve that. Well, I always think very practically, and awareness is good, but it does not get the job done. Somebody's got to actually be there to be an advocate for the person who doesn't have the resources to go and hire them. And so the system is very dependent outside of criminal, where a public defender can be appointed. In the civil courts especially, there is a lack of representation, and it is totally dependent on pro bono activities of lawyers and organizations, not-for-profits like Prairie State Legal Services and similar groups that provide these. And those need to be enhanced and funded. There have been steps to improve the amount of time that lawyers provide services for free, and that is now reported. It's not required, but it is reported by attorneys when they report their continuing education credits every 2 years. I think that can be enhanced, and I think there have to be financial incentives for it, and that obviously has to come from someplace. But this is something the courts are responsible for. Equal justice under law needs to be provided.
Thank you. And this will be your last question. Do you believe the composition of juries adequately and fairly reflects society at large? Why or why not? And what could be done to change this if not? So Candidate Kennedy, we'll have you go first.
So I think there is underrepresentation of people of various classes and backgrounds. For example, someone who has to work to earn their pay can't take 2, 3, 4 weeks or more off of work without pay if they don't get that kind of coverage for jury service. And people who work on their own, entrepreneurs as well, sometimes fall into that. That's on the economic side. In terms of people from differing backgrounds, they may be underrepresented with the jury pools. There's a reliance on voting records, for example, that many people may not register to vote or may move and therefore not be ever called to jury duty. So I do think there are things that need to be done at that higher level to expand the pools, but also in the courtrooms, there are many people that are not chosen for various types of cases because they may have had interactions with law enforcement. They may have had, so on a criminal jury, very often people are excused from service by the lawyers or sometimes by the judge for cause because they have family members in the criminal system. And those are things that could be modified, perhaps by statute, but certainly judges need to be aware that we can't allow for the systematic exclusion of anybody in juries.
Thank you. Candidate Boles, your thoughts?
This is an ongoing issue, I think, for the entire judiciary. I don't think that the juries are an adequate representation of the populations that they serve. And this has been an issue in our county, I think all over the state for the most part. Again, as I was chief judge, we considered our county can almost be divided up into a north, a middle, and a south end. And we had talked about mandating this many people from the north, this many people from the middle, this many people from the south, in an attempt to get an adequate representation throughout the county. Unfortunately, the summons that were sent out, then you don't get returns on those and you can't then fill a jury. I know licenses are one way of bringing in a jury pool. And while that often gives you a valid jury summons because you have a location and an adequate address for someone, it doesn't always mean that it's an equal representation, because whether it's ethnicity or socioeconomic, you're just going to get people that have a driver's license. So this has been an ongoing issue. Again, one that we tried to address and did attempt to address when I was chief, and felt like, all right, we need other avenues to try and make this happen, because people are entitled to that when they walk into a courtroom, to see people that look like them, that speak like them, that can understand them. And so it's something we need to continue to try and solve.
Thank you both so much. Now what I'd like to do is start your closing statements. You have 1 minute and a half or 90 seconds for closing statements. And Candidate Boles, we'll start with you.
My closing statement is simply going to be to thank you all for hosting this evening, the League of Women Voters of King County, the NAACP of King County, as well as Mano Family Resource Center. I thank you all. I know this is a Herculean task to get everybody's schedules put together and get this all organized. And so I am grateful. I think Judge Kenny and I both just want the voters to know how important this race is, and know the credentials, and know about us as judges in making an informed decision. So I thank you all.
Thank you. Candidate Kennedy, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you. 90 seconds is not enough for any of these answers.
90.
Yeah, I understand. But thank you again. The mission of the courts includes educating the public. And so it is absolutely essential that we all be here to educate the public. And what I find when I talk to people generally out there is a lack of information about the courts generally. And you are filling a role that we certainly appreciate. Now, in terms of me and my candidacy, I've got a very broad and diverse set of experiences, and I was not lucky enough. I did not have the connections to have been appointed as a young man, but I did take a very long, hard path, and I was dedicated for many, many years toward being a judge, and I take this responsibility very, very seriously. I've been endorsed by women's rights organizations, police and first responders, teachers, firefighters, those who recognize the background that I have in bringing a new perspective to a court that very often reflects a different background. and set of experiences. And so I think I can have a positive impact in making sure that justice is truly served and that it affects everybody in a way that is fair and that takes into account the range of different people in our society. And so I thank you for helping get the word out. And that's all we have time for.
And I, on behalf of everyone watching, want to thank you both for running for office and for becoming candidates and believing so strongly in the judiciary. So thank you so much. I'll give you a clap from everybody, and you can turn your cameras off now. Thank you. And I want to thank everyone here for watching. Our democracy thrives when all of us are engaged. Attending or watching a candidate forum is a great way for you to empower yourself to make an informed decision on election day. Tonight's forum has been sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Deerfield, Lincolnshire, Highland Park, Highwood, Lake County, Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area, Northwest Lake County, McHenry County, Mano Family Resource Center, and the NAACP Lake County branch. I would encourage you all to access their websites for key dates and other election information as you make your plan to go vote on November 8th. We hope that you all will vote and encourage your family and friends and neighbors to do the same so that you all will express your preference by voting for the candidates of your choice on November 8th. Thank you so much. Good night.